Hello, Namaskar, Vanakkam. I hope you have already seen part 1 of the video, explanation video of this chapter number 9, life processes in animals, in which I discussed about the digestive system. So, we've already finished about the eating part. Let's now talk about the breathing part. Both of them, as I said, extremely essential in order to ensure that we live a healthy life. So, life processes in animals, video number 2, dealing with the respiratory system. Now, this is where we stopped video number 1. Now, we have learned in the first video that the nutrients from the digested food, whatever you are eating, right? Whether you are eating, let's say, chapati with some sabzi, right? So whatever nutrients are there from the dal, from the atta, which is from the wheat, or gluten-free in terms of jawar, bajra, or ragi, all those nutrients are carried to different parts of the body, right? Now, some of those nutrients, the good part of that food, are necessary in order to give us strength, in order to repair our body. There are others like sugar, which are broken inside the body in order to provide us with energy, right? Now comes the definition which you need to remember. The definition that you need to remember is that the process by which the nutrients are converted into usable energy is called respiration. Now, in normal language, we generally use breathing and respiration almost like synonyms. That's not right. Breathing is different from respiration. This is the definition of respiration that you need to remember, that it is a process by which all these nutrients that you have taken inside your body through the food or through whatever you drank is converted into usable energy, and this process is called respiration. Now let's understand that in detail. We've already talked about briefly in class 6 about how living beings, they respire. Now, is the process, is the way I respire, is it different from, let's say, the fish or the frog or the earthworm or a cow? That's what we are going to read about in this particular chapter. Now, when you talk about respiration in human beings, we breathe in, which is called inhalation. That is the process of breathing in. The process of breathing in is called inhalation. The process of breathing out is called exhalation. In X. Okay. What do? You breathe in oxygen predominantly and you release carbon dioxide. Okay. So are breathing and respiration different or are they same? Now, if you look in here, the respiratory system, for those of you who may be interested in knowing what is it called in Hindi, it is called Shwasan Tantra in Hindi, just for your GK. Now, the process of breathing and exhaling air is called breathing. The process of this is breathing. I'm breathing in, breathing out. This is called breathing. Simple. Respiration is the process by which, as I explained just now, the nutrients are converted into usable energy. Now, some of you may get a little confused. Wasn't digestive system also, digestion also something similar? There is a difference. Digestion is the process of breaking down food into simpler substances. So you need to know the difference between digestion and respiration. That's absolutely important. Okay, which is why I put both of them together so that you understand. Now, how do we breathe? The process of breathing and exhaling air is called breathing, as I just now told you. You can live without food because people fast for 48 hours, 72 hours, sometimes even up to a week. But can you live without breathing for even 4 minutes, 3 minutes? Impossible. Your lungs will start saying, give me air, give me air, give me some air, right? So that's not possible. So breathing that way is a much more of an important activity, life-giving activity than digestion, than eating, right? Obviously, you can survive without eating and drinking for some time, but you cannot survive without breathing for a long period of time. Now, Just like the food, I told you about the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, in between the liver and pancreas play a role, the large intestine, rectum, and anus. That's the entire alimentary canal. How does the wind go in, the air that we breathe? That is called the respiratory system. The, the body also, every body also has a specific system for breathing and respiration. That's called respiratory system. It consists of various parts because of which you have the exchange of gases. Oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide comes out. Some part of oxygen also comes out that we will know about in a while. Now, if you see this particular figure, number 9.8, which is the human respiratory system. Now here, the first part is the nostrils. This is the nostrils, the nose, the two nostrils from where you inhale. Some people make the mistake of breathing in even through the mouth. That's dangerous. That's not advisable. That's not healthy. Because what happens is that the mouth has a system in the form of hair inside your nose, because of which some kind of filtration takes place. The mouth, there is no filtration and all the air goes in, and thereby you may also inhale a number of germs, right? Bacteria. So the nose is a more effective medium through which you should ideally inhale. Then the inhaled air passes through small passages, which is called a pair of small passages, which is known as the nasal passage. That is, this part inside is the nasal passage. Now, you also have tiny hair inside your nostrils, because these hair, along with mucus, help trap dust and dirt and germs from the air we breathe in. Therefore, we get the better quality air to breathe inside our nostrils. Now, from the nasal passage, now this is the nasal passage which is going in, and then you come into this is the windpipe. This is the windpipe. Now, the windpipe and the esophagus are both going inside, almost parallel, right? They're both going inside, which is why sometimes what happens, sometimes when you're eating, you suddenly start coughing. Okay. And then your mother or father will just do tak, tak, tak kind of a thing to kind of settle you down, right? What happens in that kind of, or you are eating, you're also laughing at some joke your brother or sister or parent may have cracked. At which time what happens is that the food particle, instead of going into the esophagus, goes into the windpipe. Interesting, right? It goes into the windpipe, and the windpipe, you're not supposed to send in food. So the windpipe reacts, which is why you start coughing. Coughing in order to take out that food particle. You go in your tunnel, don't come into my tunnel, right? That's why it happens that when they say, no, oh, khana, has gone into the wrong pipe, it has gone into the windpipe. So the other thing is, as I said, you should breathe in only with your nose, not with your mouth. Now, from the nasal passages, the air reaches the two lungs, which are there on either side of your body, right? This is on the left and this is on the right. But I mean, if you see it, depends on which angle you are seeing it. Let's say from my side, the way I'm seeing it, I'm calling this as the left lung and this as the right lung. Though technically, if this person's face is looking straight at me, then the left lung will be the right lung and the right lung will be the left lung. But anyway, for basic understanding, we are saying this. Okay. Here also, they have mentioned it like that, only right lung and left lung. Now, the white portion that you see, this white thing, this is called the rib cage. What is the rib cage function? It is to protect the lungs, so that when you have somebody coming and putting a blow on your chest, right? If there was no rib cage, the person's punch, and if it's a boxer kind of a punch, it will come and puncture the lungs. So it is the rib cage function. It's like a helmet that a cricketer wears when he's going out to bat, so that it does not hit the lungs directly. It is a helmet for the lungs. Thereafter, you have the windpipe. The windpipe forms two branches, right? The windpipe forms two branches which enter the two lungs. What you are seeing out here, the two branches that you are seeing out here, like this and like this, you will have both of them, one branch going into the right lung, one branch going similarly into the left lung, right? This rib cage, don't think that it is only on the left lung. The same kind of rib cage will also be here. It has not been drawn here so that you can see the what is inside the lung also. Let me just remove this out here so that there is no confusion. Okay. Now, in the lungs, these branches of the windpipe further divide into smaller and finer, smaller branches, which end up in balloon-like sacs, which are called alveoli. Now, this alveoli is an extremely important part of the lung system, right? And our lungs are protected by the rib cage, what I mentioned to you, right? I hope you have understood the functions of the different parts of the human respiratory system. Now, you would recall during COVID, of course, you would have been very young, 4 years younger, while a lot of the dust is, so at that time, the SARS-CoV-2 virus affected the respiratory system, and that led to a lot of breathing difficulties. A lot of people had breathing difficulties, as a result of which many people even died. They had to be hospitalized. They had to get oxygen cylinders. They had major lung problems, etc. All this happened in 2020, 2021 during the COVID pandemic. Now, there is a small experiment that has been explained out here. Basically, what you need to do is to take a bottle, remove the base from here. Okay, you remove the base from here. Okay, then you kind of put in something, and you put in a Y-shaped thing with two branches, and here you put something which can inflate like a balloon. Okay, you close this thing with any kind of material. Now, what is the experiment is that when you pull the thing outwards, okay, then these two balloons actually inflate. But when you pull it back, when you put it back, these become deflated. They have no air. So basically, it is the same thing which is being explained. When you, for example, if I am inhaling, right now, my chest is getting inflated because similar to the balloons, it has got inflated. But when I breathe out, my chest goes inside. The balloons have got deflated. So the same thing is what happens, that when you breathe in, when you inhale, your chest expands as the ribs move up and outwards. The ribs move outwards. What you're seeing in diagram 9.10, A part, when you are inhaling, you are seeing that these ribs are actually moving outwards. So the chest looks like, chhati phuli hui hai, it is kind of expanded, right? Both lungs, not just one lung, both lungs are expanded. And the diaphragm, which is the portion below out here, right? The portion out here is the diaphragm. It moves downwards. So it is kind of creating more space within the entire chest area for the lungs to expand, right? So that's what is happening. But when you exhale, when you breathe out, the diaphragm moves back to its original position, and these lungs and the ribs also moves back, and it moves to a deflated kind of position. So that is something which happens every time you inhale and exhale. That is, the air is drawn in. The air is drawn in from where? The air is drawn in from here, right? And the air is sent out like this through the windpipe. Now, what do the balloons in the model represent? Because they represent the lungs. Pranayam, if some of you follow yoga, that kind of helps in the right kind of everything in life is actually related to how you breathe, the process of breathing. So pranayam helps in mind relaxation. It helps in the right kind of breathing techniques. My mother is a yoga expert. In Ladakh, people practice tummo breathing. It is called tummo breathing. What it essentially means that it improves lung function and helps keep the body warm even in the cold weather of Ladakh. So that is something which is really recommended to many people. Now there is one more experiment in activity 9.3. What it says is that lime water, yani ki chune ka pani, right? Not nimbu pani. Or it says freshly, it should be lemon water, but I am assuming they're talking about lime water. So lime water in two test tubes, A and B. So in the first one, they are saying that you put in fresh air into lime water. In the second one, you exhale air into the second test tube, which also contains lime water. What does it happen? The lime water in test tube number B, it turns milky in color. Okay, it turns milky in color, but the lime water in test tube A does not change. What does it indicate? That lime water turns milky when it reacts with carbon dioxide, because you're exhaling carbon dioxide. Whereas in test tube 1, you're putting fresh air, which has more of oxygen and very little of carbon dioxide. So it indicates that the exhaled air contains more carbon dioxide than the air we inhale. Now let's come to this part, which is a little more complicated. Okay, this is the diagram which kind of shows you the different part. The windpipe is also incidentally called trachea. This is another name for the windpipe. Okay, so you have the nasal openings. Let me just do a quick revision. You have the nose. Okay, from the nose you are you are coming in like this. This is the trachea. This is the trachea. Okay, it goes in, the windpipe goes into the two lungs. It kind of goes into these different small parts, which are the alveoli. Okay, these are the alveoli, and you are seeing these are the rib cage. Okay, and below is the diaphragm. Okay, the two branches to reach the lungs, the alveoli, the rib cage, and the diaphragm. Now, how does the exchange of gases take place? Now, this is important, so listen to this carefully. Now, you are seeing that these are the alveoli which are there inside the lungs. Okay, the red portion are the blood vessels through which the circulation is taking place. We will learn about circulatory system later. Okay, now through the process of breathing, when we breathe, fresh air from the outside enters our lungs and it fills the alveoli. Okay, listen carefully. It fills the alveoli, which is filled with fresh air. The alveoli have very thin walls. Their walls are actually very thin, and they are surrounded by tubes which contain blood. So if this is the alveoli, it is also surrounded by blood vessels which are containing blood. Okay, these are very close to each other. Now the blood carries the carbon dioxide from the body and it transfers it to the alveoli. And alveoli contains oxygen, the fresh oxygen that has come from outside. It transfers it into the blood vessels. So this exchange of gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, takes place between the alveoli and the blood vessels. Okay, so the alveoli have thin walls surrounded by fine tubes containing blood. The blood carries carbon dioxide from the body into the alveoli, from where it is and then it is released through the air. From the alveoli, it goes back into the windpipe and it is sent outside. It happens on a regular basis. At the same time, oxygen from the alveoli passes into the blood, and the blood vessels go into different parts of the body, to the mind, to the legs, to the feet, to the fingers, everywhere, right? So it passes into the body and it is transported to all parts of the body, right? So this is an important part of this respiratory system, that this exchange of gases takes place through the alveoli into the blood tubes or the blood vessels. Have you ever wondered how the food you eat gives you energy? Now that's another part, because that's what we learned about what exactly is respiration. While you may think that it is the food which is giving me the energy, that's not complete. The food, of course, is going to give you energy, but that's also because of the oxygen. Because when we eat any kind of food, the body breaks it down into simple substances like sugar. That is done by the digestive system. What happens then is that the oxygen that you are inhaling, it helps to further break down the glucose in order to release energy. The oxygen reacts with the food which is there, the sugar, in order to release energy. So this process is called respiration. So the word equation of the process. So this particular paragraph is important, that when we eat food, our body breaks it down into simple substances like sugar, which is also glucose and sugar are the same thing. Oxygen helps break down the glucose to release energy. So if oxygen was not there, you may not get the energy. So food in itself is not complete. You need oxygen in order to release energy. And this process is called respiration. The word equation of the process of respiration is glucose plus oxygen leads to carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. The energy being the most important. Carbon dioxide is released outside. Okay. Now, during breathing, we inhale air from our surroundings and we exhale air having more carbon dioxide. So when we are inhaling, we are not counting the nitrogen, which is also there in sufficient quantity in the atmosphere. So the inhaled air has about 21% oxygen, but only 0.04% carbon dioxide. So very little, almost negligible carbon dioxide, but it has in 21% oxygen. But when we are exhaling about 5%, 4 to 5% carbon dioxide. So this 0.04% carbon dioxide gets converted to 4 to 5% carbon dioxide, and about 16 to 17%, because all oxygen is not consumed, some of the oxygen is also exhaled. So note that all the oxygen is not used up, what I have just now mentioned to you. Some other animals can use a larger fraction of the oxygen during respiration. This exchange of gases ensures that each segment of our body gets oxygen to produce energy and remove waste products. In simple words, breathing brings in oxygen, removes carbon dioxide, while respiration uses oxygen to break down food and release energy. This energy helps us walk, talk, run, play, think, every activity, right? So this paragraph is very important for you to understand the entire difference between breathing and respiration. The definition I showed you, and then this explanation you will need to write in your examination in order to get the complete 3 marks. Okay, the difference between breathing and respiration you should be able to explain. If I have to tell you again, breathing is a simple process of inhalation and exhalation. But respiration is much more complicated, because respiration uses the oxygen that we inhale to break down the glucose and release energy. And that energy is what helps us perform different activities. Understood? Great. So breathing is a physical process. You inhale, you exhale, while respiration is a chemical process. Very important. You have to use these words in order to get the marks. Physical process, chemical process. Chemical, why? Because it is using oxygen to release. Because just now I showed you a chemical reaction. Glucose plus oxygen leading to carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. That is a chemical reaction. And these are important for our survival. You need breathing, obviously. And because of the oxygen, it helps us give energy. So our body has a unique system for the transport of nutrients, oxygen, and other substances through blood. This system is called the circulatory system. It includes the heart, the blood vessels, the arteries, and the veins. The heart pumps blood through the blood vessels. It goes into the heart also. The heart pumps blood, ensuring the transport of nutrients, oxygen, and other substances to various parts of the body. Sometimes you realize some people have this problem that my left side is paralyzed. I'm not able to use my left hand, it's paralyzed. Mainly what happens, the oxygen and the blood vessels are not going there. There is blood clotting, or no oxygen and the blood is not flowing to that part of the body, as a result of which the left side of the human body of a person could be paralyzed, right? So that's what really happens. Now, smoking, all of you need to know that's a bad habit. You should never ever pick up, right? Because it completely damages your lungs and increases the risk of cancer and other kind of diseases. You cough, you get other kind of respiratory illnesses, you are more prone to infections. You're also putting others at risk, because when you exhale that smoke air, you're actually putting the non-smoker also at risk. So that is something which you should never ever think of doing in your life. Okay. What about other animals? What do they do? Now this is fascinating. What about the fish? Now fish, they also swim, obviously. So how do they breathe? they have something called the gills. Okay, this is not Shubman Gill, this is gill. Okay, so the fish have something called the gills. So animals such as birds, elephants, lions, goat, cows, goats, lizards, and snakes breathe through their lungs. But the aquatic animals like fish, they have the gills. Now these are supplied with blood vessels, and the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the gases dissolved in the water takes place through these gills. Now this is the important, the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, what is taking place in the human body through the alveoli and the blood vessels. Here it takes place between the blood and the gases dissolved in the air, takes place across the gills. So gills perform their functions. What about the frogs, which live both on land as well as in water? Now they use very different body parts. Very interesting. Okay, the tadpoles, which are the smaller, the smaller stage of the frogs, they breathe through gills, while adult frogs use lungs. So they have gills, the tadpoles, while the adult frogs have lungs for breathing on land and skin for gas exchange while they stay in water. So while they are in water, they use the skin for breathing, for exchange of gases. When they are on land, they use the lungs. So very interesting. They have gills, they have lungs, as well as they use skin. So frogs are a very interesting species. They use the skin when they are in water. The adult frog uses the lungs. The tadpoles, that is a smaller version of the frogs, uses the gills. As a result of which they are able to survive both on water as well as on land. What about the earthworm? The earthworms you would have seen, the brown color insects, not insects, they are a form of, what do we call it? Organisms that you would find especially during rainy season and on moist soil. So they use their skin, which is very moist, very soft, for exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So what you essentially find is that different animals use different kind of breathing mechanisms to suit their different kind of habitat. Habitat is what? We learned it in class 6. Habitat is essentially what you, the ecosystem that you live in. We live on land. The frogs live on land as well as on water. The fish live inside the water, right? So different organisms, depending on the kind of habitat they live, they have adapted. So apart from the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the circulatory system, there are also other kind of systems, the endocrine glands, the excretory system, the reproductive system. All these play a role in order to ensure that your human body, also other animals and birds, they are able to perform different functions in order to live. And we will learn about the circulatory system, excretory system, endocrine glands, reproductive system in further classes. Okay, there is also the muscular system. All this you will learn in further classes. So with that, we come to the end. You can go through the notes in the nutshell in order to understand what all we have learned so far. And in the next video, I will go through all the questions which are there at the end of the chapter, so that this entire chapter is complete. But I'm very sure with the explanation that I've given, you will already be able to tackle all of these questions. Okay, tata, bye bye. Thank you very much. Share the video with 3 of your friends and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon. And now, breathe in, breathe out. Tata, bye bye.